welcome to Foster Friday Live. We are so glad that you are tuning in. We are so excited to be talking about respite care today.
Yes, I'm so excited.
We were just chatting that respite care is something that we don't talk about nearly enough because it's not understood, it's not clear, we don't know how to use it, and maybe once we do, we even feel a little bit uncomfortable using it. So I am so glad to have you here. If you would just introduce yourself, and as you join us, introduce yourselves to us. Just leave us a comment to let us know that you're here.
Well, I'm Jocelyn Gibson. I am the program coordinator with Foster Family and Licensing Support with DSS here in the Upstate.
Awesome. And so as we talk about respite care today, and you will kind of remind us of this, we are talking mostly from the DSS licensed family perspective. Hey, Jill, we're glad you're here. And actually, Jill, I think, was the one that recommended that we do this topic today. So we are talking, because as Jocelyn is from DSS, talking about the policies and procedures that are officially in place for DSS, and tell us if someone is licensed from a private licensing agency, which is wonderful, what they might want to do to learn their own policies.
Yeah, every private agency encourages their families to use respite as well. Respite is self-care for foster families. Any foster care agency wants their families to make use of that to take care of themselves. It's going to look a little bit different from agency to agency. So for specific questions for our families licensed through those, they would want to talk to their licensing coordinator there to get more information about how they facilitate that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're talking about respite care, but maybe we need to talk about what it is. For foster families, prospective foster families, families thinking about how to get into foster care. What is respite?
Okay. Well, respite care is temporary care designed for foster families that have a longer-term placement of a foster child. It is twofold. It is used and it is encouraged that foster families use it just for that self-care purpose. Fostering is very rewarding, but it's not without its challenges, and a break can be welcomed. So a family could request respite just because they need perhaps a weekend to kind of recoup and have some couple time. Respite can also be used when a family is having a bit of an emergency where it may not be as planned. If, for example, a family had to suddenly travel out of state to deal with a family emergency. So there's a couple different kinds of respite. There is an official DSS respite policy where families earn a certain amount of respite care, where it would be called a paid respite. It runs from October to October, and a family earns 1/2 day of respite for every month of that they have any child in their home. It's kind of a formula, and we have to sometimes get some help ourselves when a family says, how many paid respite days do I have? When a family is using their paid respite days, their ongoing board payment is not affected. So even while the child is gone, their stipend stays the same, but the other family also gets paid through DSS. A lot of families, and probably the majority of the respite that happens, is more family-to-family respite. Using reasonable and prudent parenting, foster families can certainly use each other and work out respite between themselves, and a lot of times they'll just...
I think a lot of families do. Hey, Gail, thanks for joining us.
I think a lot of families definitely do that, and that's a wonderful way to support each other, is working it out and then paying each other directly. We can help make those connections too. For example, if a family doesn't have paid respite days or has already used them, we can help connect two families for that and kind of help work out the details of what they pick up and how much they would want to pay each other out of their board payment, and that works really, really well. We're always happy to help families with that and encourage them to ask for that when they need it. And then, of course, under reasonable and prudent parenting, families also always have the option of using their babysitters, which wouldn't necessarily be respite, but it's another way to get a break. If you need your foster child to go with your other children and spend the weekend with grandma, that's fantastic.
So it sounds, maybe I'm hearing this correctly, like there's three ways. So official respite care through DSS, where DSS kind of makes that match.
Facilitates the payment, yes.
Where
yes.
you may not know that foster family
right.
who's officially licensed to provide respite.
Correct.
Then there's foster family to foster family, people you know that you trust.
Right.
And then unofficial
using your babysitter. Right, and getting some respite by using your babysitter.
Okay, great. So that might be a little bit confusing. I know that it has been a little bit to me. So please, as you have questions, as you're joining us, let us know what questions you have so we know how to answer them for you. So once a family decides that they need to utilize respite, they want to go through DSS. They're a DSS family. They want to utilize DSS respite care. How do they start?
Okay, well, we do it all the time, all day long, every day. They would want to just ask their family support coordinator.
Okay.
So whoever is their ongoing licensing worker, they can let them know that they're going to need respite care. Obviously, as much notice as possible is appreciated, but we understand things happen and they come up. So they reach out to their family support coordinator, let us know what the need is, when the need is, and then our placement unit will start working on that for them.
Okay. So now respite is short term. What does that mean? What does that look like?
It could look like several different things. It could be as simple as a family is going out of town for the weekend. It could be as complex as a family is going out of town, out of the state for a week to deal with things. So it really varies.
There's not a hard
and fast rule, except for that official paid respite, where you can use those accrued paid days, and usually you end up with about 3 of those paid days in a row. But you could combine that with some unpaid and work out a week, a week where some is the paid respite, some is the unpaid. We're pretty familiar with working all that out and can explain to a family what they're looking at.
So if someone didn't have paid days, they could still use DSS as kind of the matchmaker.
Absolutely.
And then they would work out directly with that family offering respite?
Correct. We would help calculate the daily rate and let them know how much to pay when they drop off their child.
So basically they're utilizing respite, but they're still getting, the foster family is getting paid their daily board rate. And then maybe they are paying that daily board rate or something similar to that family that has the child.
If they're not using their official paid exactly. Their board payment would go on, their direct deposit or money on their card would go on just as usual, and then they have paid ahead to the other family who wouldn't get paid directly from DSS. And it works out wonderfully.
Okay. So, and we were talking a little bit about this too. I don't know about you, but I put the guilt on myself. So how many foster families can raise their hand and say, I felt a little bit nervous or unsure about how to use respite care? So what do you, like if a foster family just feels like, I shouldn't use respite care, I should be strong enough and good enough and Wonder Woman enough to not need help?
Everybody needs a break. People with their own biological children, they get babysitters, they use their relatives, they use their friends for a little bit of respite. Respite it doesn't have to be a long event. It could be just overnight. Foster parents have such a hard job. Foster care is so rewarding, but anybody that's fostering knows that there are the challenges and the stressors, and taking care of yourself helps you take care of the children. So please use respite. Please never experience guilt about asking for respite. Yeah.
Well, and I will say we had to utilize respite for our kids a couple weeks ago, and in one of our little ones, every night he asks about Miss Beth, Miss Beth. They had such a good time, and I came back, I felt a little bit bad, like that they would rather stay at this respite home. They just had such a good time. It was short term. It was just for the weekend. So they had a blast doing special things and having special breakfasts, and they got to play video games that they don't get to play at home. So, I mean,
it's a respite for them sometimes too.
I felt a little bit bad that we weren't bringing them to this out-of-state wedding with us, but they ended up having a much better time.
Right. Sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you take a placement and you already had something lined up and you just can't get an extra plane ticket or something like that. So you have to use Respite. And what works really well, like that family that you made a connection with, maybe they could be your ongoing Respite resource. So the children
we're paying them back. We're doing Respite for them in a couple
of
weeks. So, so Jill says, I've always heard many Respite homes make it a mini holiday for the kids.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this family did for us. They were awesome. They went to the lake and they went to the splash pad and they had chocolate chip muffins. I mean, this was like the dream for our kids. And this was a family that was in the process of getting their license.
Okay.
So it almost, and not practice. They weren't practice kids, but I don't know how to say that.
Well,
like they were like testing the waters.
That's what we say. We say doing respite care, getting licensed, and before taking long-term placements, doing respite care is kind of a way to get your feet wet.
Yeah,
is the way we put it sometimes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about that. Like a family, maybe they have been a babysitter for foster families, or they've mentored children in foster care. They've volunteered in childcare at foster parent association meetings, and they're thinking about getting licensed, but they feel really nervous about full-time care.
Exactly. Respite is a absolutely wonderful option for them. Some of our wonderful respite families are even retirees, like grandparent age. So they love having children for the weekend and doting on them and getting to see them regularly when the other foster family needs respite. And it's perfect for families that don't feel they can make a commitment to school and doctor's visits and dentists, but they're doing an absolutely wonderful service to the children just by being respite families. It is the same process for licensure. It's not a modified process, but the good news about that is if a family enjoys respite so much that they then decide, I think we could do this full time, they don't have to go back through anything else. They're already ready to go.
Okay, awesome. Well, and Jill, what are the rules about unofficial respite with unlicensed families?
Okay.
How many days? So we talked about reasonable and prudent parenting, and we said that so you wouldn't officially or technically be able to call it respite care. It would babysitting.
Yeah, Jill,
it's still a respite.
Yeah, you could use the word respite, but really what we would call that is babysitting, using a babysitter for the children. We usually say, and there's no hard and fast rules, but generally up to about a week of that would be acceptable. Like if a family was traveling and they were going to leave the children here with the grandma, with the foster family's family, or a babysitter,
friend,
right?
Someone they trust.
Yes, someone they trust. Usually about up to a week. But they do need to notify their caseworker of where the children are going to be. Anything really over 48 hours, DSS would need to be notified. Just not really ask permission, but notified of where the children will be.
Or if they were doing this through their agency,
yes,
however their agency.
Yeah, the child's caseworker and their licensing agency.
Okay, so both.
Yes.
So now, about a week, you said. Now, this past time, it was just a weekend, but our flights were crazy delayed. Let's say we were on day 7, our flights are delayed, they have to stay for day 8. Is there a penalty? There's some sort of grace because there's not a hard and fast
We understand that life has its challenges. Life is unpredictable, so we work with what comes up. We want families to be able to live as normal of a life as possible, and we understand that life happens.
So we were talking a little bit about families who go through this official licensing process with DSS or with another agency as well, to just offer respite care. What might that look like for them? So they've become licensed and what might a first call or the first placement look
Right.
like?
We're still going to ask them, just like when a family gets licensed, and I'm sure you remember this, we ask you up front, now what are your preferences? What kind of calls do you want to get? Are you, what age of child, gender? We're going to ask a respite family the same thing. What kind of respite are you looking to do? How many children at a time? What type of special needs? And then usually our respite families will give us heads up when they're available. So a respite family may have availability, 10 weekends a year, 20 weekends a year, a week at a time. It really is, it's a very flexible thing. Sometimes we may call and they're not available, but that's okay. A lot of our long-time respite families do tend to give us a heads up of when they're going to be available. And a time that we desperately need, we realize how much we need our respite families is around the major holidays. Because a lot of families travel out of state on Labor Day, other holidays. Other holidays like that, where again they may have just gotten a placement and they just can't work it out.
So, I know our Facebook page for our local association is already blowing up with respite requests for the week between Christmas and New Year's, right? So that we need respite families. And if you start now, you might be able to be licensed by then.
That is a very good chance. Absolutely.
Now, just as we wrap up, we had kind of mentioned emergency care, and emergency and respite sometimes get talked about together. Can you give us a quick snippet on what that might look like?
I would say the main difference is respite is planned. Emergency is just that. We may have a particular situation going on with children that are coming into care, and we have a foster home lined up for them that perhaps they're out of town and won't be back for a couple days. So we may ask a family to do that short-term kind of care for them without much notice. So,
which we've had to utilize before. We've been out of state when we accepted a placement. An emergency family stepped up.
Exactly. So a lot of those families do double duty with that.
So a respite family could offer planned respite and choose to also be available for emergency.
Exactly.
Okay, exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in. I hope that this answered some of your questions. It may get you thinking about more things, and you might have more questions, and we will do our best to answer those. So just leave a comment with your question. And how is paid respite paid to the respite family? Is it a set time during the month, right after respite? So I think maybe like a family who is utilizing the official paid respite, how does that family get paid?
There is some internal paperwork we do, and then the family that provided the respite does get a check. It doesn't come on their regular, on their e-pay card.
Okay, so they should get a paper check in the mail.
Yes.
And
we sometimes say 6 to 8 weeks because it is going through a different payment process.
Great. Jill, does that answer your question, I think? And maybe we can get y'all connected if you have more questions. That's a great question, because I think the payment is just really confusing with the paid days and the not paid days. And do I pay? Does DSS pay? How does that work?
Yeah, and when we're lining one up, we are very specific. We send out an email to both families, and this is how you pay, this is how much. So we try to make it as simplified as possible.
And sometimes it just seems like there's nothing simple in foster care, but there's so much benefit in utilizing respite still. So thank you, Jill, for those questions. I really appreciate it. But thank you so much. And thank you, Jocelyn. And we will see you all next week. Bye.